things that we're going to go over. It should only take just about 45 minutes to an hour, and then the rest of the lecture will be all working day, and then lab you'll be free to work. So I want to go over bringing your map into Unity and how to set it up and test it using the map projection tool. Another thing I'm going to cover is animation events and adding in another state into your wind turbine. That'll be very helpful in just getting an insight how to use animation events and set up audio in a different way. And then I'm going to showcase how to bring an asset into Maya and make some changes to it, and basically how to save an FBX in Maya and bring it into Unity. All right, so three pretty straightforward things. Shouldn't take too long. So the first thing you want to do with your map, remember to make a copy of your map for your final, right? Have two separate links. But say you want to bring your map in how it is into Unity. First thing you want to do is you need to make two documents. So I'm going to make a new drawing. See if I can open that on a new page. All right, and on my new drawing, I want this page setup to be something specific. I want it to be a custom setup, so that was File, Page Setup. And then we go custom here, and then we're going to change this to pixels. All right, so when working with game engines and working with Unity, it really likes square images. Anybody want to take a guess as why it wants, square images? If you ever heard of, 256 by 256, 512 by 512? Chuck, do you know? You know you came from game art. Do you know why it wants those numbers? It's not quite. So we want square images so the pixels are all uniform, but instead of like 900 by 900 or 1,000 by 1,000, numbers like this, like 256, 512, 1024, 2048, those are all powers of 2. So the computer can break that down and divide that very quickly and very efficiently. So powers of 2 are the way you want to go, and always a square image, so nothing is ever distorted. So 2048 by 2048, we want something nice and big just to view our map. This isn't going to be in our final game at any point. And now let's just name this drawing. So I'm going to call this test map. Test map rough. All right, so now that we've got that document, that's what we're going to end up saving. In the final map itself, or in your map, I'm going to make a copy of this one. All right, save that. And now what you want to do here is just isolate everything that is the map itself. So for now, you can remove your reference images and the legend. We just want to grab the map itself so we can run around on it and test it. You can go in there and delete some of the note numbers or whatever you like, but that looks pretty good. Let's delete some of these arrows. So now I'm just going to select everything I've got left and copy. Come back to my square image now and paste. All right, so now I've got everything there to load all in. So now this is the one opportunity you do have to now scale up your map. So before you shouldn't have scaled the player icon, the car image, none of those to keep everything uniform. But now we actually can scale everything up uniformly. So if you hold shift while you hover over one of these side arrows or these little side squares, as you drag, it's going to scale everything in a uniform so it won't end up distorting. You'll notice if you let go of shift and try and scale, I can stretch it and skew everything. That's not what you want. So hold down shift and make your map fit as large as possible into this space. So depending on the shape of your map, you may not, everyone's isn't going to be the exact same size at this point. If your map is more elongated, you may have to not scale it up as much to make it fit in this space. But that's okay because we can compensate for that again in Unity. So now that it's taking up as much space as possible in this square, let's go ahead and now save this. So to do so, we're just going to go to File, Download As. We can download it as a PNG. And now whatever you name this map up here is what the name of the file is that's going to be downloaded. So keep that in mind. Make sure you actually give it a name. All right, so now what we want to do is inside of Unity, I'm going to just drag that file right inside of my assets. So let me put it in, again, stay organized so we can submit all this stuff to Perforce. So I'm going to put in my student name folder. Let's put it right outside here. Let's drag it right from here, drop it into... Alright, so there's the actual texture. So from here, what we're going to need to do is actually make a material for this. Oh, wait, actually I lied, we don't. So using the map projection, what we can do is let's load up this LD_student scene. And what we can do is go ahead and rename it. Not for now, let's keep it as is. This is just a test. So drop this scene in here. Alright. And now in this scene, your texture may come in strange like that. That might have something to do with the map projector. We need to have something loaded in here, but this is what we're going to be working with, this ASCORE map projector. So in here, you'll see that there's a map material. This is what is actually projecting onto this surface. So this volume here that you see, you can start to move this around and it's going to project whatever material you put onto that geometry. So here is the texture that's being projected, which is the grass, which is not correct. We want to actually pop in our map. So now when we drop our map in there, it's now being projected onto the geometry. So another thing we have available for you guys, if you look right here, there is a little image or a little piece of geometry. This is the size of your player. So this is important because we want to scale our map to fit the size. As you can tell right now, if we go ahead and move our character to this position, let me go and find him. Character container. Again, we can move him all we want, just don't rotate him, so that'll cause his jump to be very strange. So let me just move him into place. So now you can see if we leave our map just like this, it's going to feel very large, right? Because we want our actual player collision to fit inside of that capsule, right? Or inside of our player icon from our map. So when you, by default, it's not going to actually project into the world. That's part of the functionality of just being able to build. So to get it to show up while you're playing, you can hold down GM Enter. That's for God mode. So then basically in here you'll see that there's also another button in here. It's called projection. Go ahead and hit projection, and that's going to project what you have onto the map. And notice how it's a camera that's projecting a texture. So it's projecting onto my character right now as well. So not something you're going to want in the final, but it's really good for actually testing. So now you'll notice that as I start to play and actually pretend like I'm playing this level, start to notice all this empty space and how long it takes me to get from setup to setup. Right? Everything is still too large. I don't want to actually go forward and build this because that's not a clear indication of what I actually wanted from my design. So what you need to do from here is make your image of this player icon fit the size of that little start geometry we have, as well as the character, because they're pretty much the same. So pretty much the arm span of the character is a good indication of how big you want your icon to be. So how you do this is in the map projector, and now this process is a little bit tedious. You definitely have to work with it, move something, test it, move it, and test it. But once you find that right amount, it'll be worth it. So the orthographic size is what you need to do, just yes. So the orthographic size itself is what you want to scale down. It's just a value. There's no easy way to just tell you type in this number and it's going to work for you. Again, it's dependent on the size of your map. So you can just scale it down, and yes, you'll have to move the objects because it's pretty much tiling the texture over and over again. So we want to find the right one. So that's not right. So then we can just cut it down even further. So let's try. So that looks about half, so 40. looking closer. So yeah, this is just a rough estimate too. Don't think that, oh, the pentagon isn't perfectly on the size of the icon, I need to make it smaller. Just get a feel for it. See what you like, you know, as a designer, and find that pacing. And right, remember that 10-second rule. Don't have more than a long stretch of time before the player can actually do something. And this is what we're testing. So now that I've got it, and I'll turn on the projector again. All right, and again, a little bit big, but we'll give it a test. So remember, so pretend like you're actually playing this. You can pull out your phone or pull out like a stopwatch website just to basically time yourself, see how long it's taking you, and just pretend like you're coming over here. You know, jump under this, crouch under this thing, jump over here. You know, player gets a collectible. Actually pretend like you're interacting, right? If I come over here and I need to, you know, I think he had like connect a wire into this console, right? So I grab this wire over here, move it into place. And now, you know, as a player, am I going to know to, you know, basically follow the player path? So that's what you really want to test out, is your player path as well as your scale. Have you built something that's going to be conducive to players? And this is the very first start of it. You'll be able to tell a lot from actually taking the time to do this. So definitely don't skip this step. And, you know, keep on scaling it down, finding the right size, and then go back to your map. Maybe you get to a point where, like, okay, this area is a bit confusing. Maybe if I put this little red panel over here against this wall, they'll actually see that this door opens. Things like that, right? You'll start to get a little bit more information. Maybe like, okay, maybe some of this space is a little bit too small. Maybe I need to make it wider to actually allow the player to fit through here. So really cool stuff, and this is the start. This is basically what you're going to be doing the very first week of level design, is coming in here, setting up your map, and now starting to use level blocking meshes and block some of this out. So you'll see with the projection, what's awesome about it is that it's actually going to project your map onto the different pieces of geometry. So your projection volume, you can adjust it. Oh, because I was outside that's why. So there you can see, as I start to build this, it's going to project everything. So you know where everything should be when you're actually building it. So really, really cool system. That was all set up by the level design instructor, which you guys will get to know next month. All right, so let's go ahead and just save that. Let's move our character back to the hub. Yeah, and you can start working in that level design scene if you get to the point where you're ahead, either next week or even over the weekend between week 4 and next month. You can start to block out your level in that same scene. You guys are going to be using the same project and the same system, so feel free to get started either in this project or you can set up a very brand new one. Totally up to you. All right, so now that's all finished. I'm going to go ahead and remove this scene. So the one thing I wanted to showcase to you guys, this is something that I wanted to go over last Wednesday, but when I go over the wind turbine experiments, there's already enough information blasted at you. I'm sure when you signed up for Full Sail, you didn't realize part of the requirements are being able to drink out of a fire hose, right? Because you're constantly getting blasted with information, and you have to retain it all, right? And that's sometimes not the easiest thing to do when there's a lot of information in a short period of time. So what I'm going to do today pretty quickly is just showcase in the animation window, there's this thing called animation events, this little button right up here. So what animation events are the ability to basically call a function of any kind, of whatever you decide, whatever you create, in the middle of an animation or at a certain point in an animation. So what I'm going to do to my wind turbine in a nutshell is I'm going to add a wind-up state as well as a sound effect that goes with it. So in Perforce, again, I'm just going to check out the files I'm going to work on, and it probably would have been a good idea to do so before I worked on the LD student scene, but a lot of that was a test I didn't even really need to save. So for this, I'm going to work on my wind turbine scene. Let's just check that out quick. It's not letting me. Cannot find it. Oh, that's the, okay, that's why. Good thing I was in the wrong month. That is normal. So definitely I saw that error. I didn't just keep going. Actually figured out what was wrong. So this one. All right, as well as I'm going to make a change to the prefab. So that was in my student name prefabs. I'm going to change my wind turbine prefabs. Check that out. As well as, let's see, I want to make an adjustment to my animation controller, right, that holds the states and everything else, so I'm going to check that out. If there's anything else I need, I'll come back. But that's all I need for now. So let's open up the wind turbine scene. All right, and there it is. All right, so first things I want to add is an additional state to this, an actual wind-up state. So something between idle and spinning where the wind turbine is actually turning on. All right, so I'm going to open up my animation window. And now again, I want to select my pivot object, right, the one that I actually want to change, or the one that has the animation on it. Pivot. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and create a new clip, and let's call this wind up. And I'm going to save it in my animations folder. All right, and now this one, I'm going to go ahead and create an animation of a certain length. And how I know the length is that I'm going to find an actual audio clip. And this is one thing that you can definitely start to think about, is getting your audio and finding a length of the sound effect and then trying to animate that length to start with. So I'm just going to go to Westar Music and go to the sound effects tab, and then let's just search wind up. I think it was engine. So a lot of these you'll see on here, you'll notice that they're pretty long in length. So pretty decent sound effects like this chunk right here. Right, that could be like resemblant of a turning on. So maybe not a wind turbine necessarily, but a big fan or a large engine of some kind. But I don't need this whole sound effect, right? So I want to eventually chop this up. So I could show you guys real quickly how to just do so in a program like Audacity. So once you download it, if you go ahead and download the program Audacity completely free, it's pretty straightforward. It looks like this. Really the best benefit for it is just being able to just edit audio tracks and chop them, splice them together. You know, you get a lot of resources from it, but it's pretty straightforward to use. Once it's open, you can go ahead and just open a file. And if I look at my downloads, there's that wind-up sound. You'll get this little warning that you can make a copy of it first, so you can go ahead and hit OK. It's the safest mode. Then you can just play the audio in here, right, and get a chunk of it, right? So that's what we want. We only want this first 10 seconds or so. So you can, in this timeline here, you can select a certain range, right? You can just select it in here, so basically just marquee select, and in here you can use these little arrows and this will play that range. So you can get a little preview. But once you have the selected portion that you want, say I want just the first 10 seconds, right? That's how long I want my animation to be. It has to be stopped. Now I can go ahead and just export, I think export selected audio. Thought there was a way to crop it first. Let's see, just do export selected. Let's see if that gives me the chunk I want. All right, then hit OK. Yep, there we go. So I just select the area I want and then do a file export selected. There is a way to actually chop it. I think cut. No, that removes. Okay, that will just cut the part I have selected. Trim audio. There we go. So trim will just remove it, and then you can do export, or you can just do export the selected area. And now I just saved a 10-second clip to my computer. So now that I know I want my animation to be about 10 seconds, so that's where I'm going to start. So for this, I'm going to add a property, right? Same we've done before. Add a rotation for the pivot. And now for this, I'm going to drag my other keyframe all the way out to the 10-second mark. Okay, now to give this the illusion that it's turning on, we want to give this curve something a little bit more different than just the straight linear path, right? We want it to start out slow and then start to wind up a lot faster. So in the curves, we want to set this to be 0 at the start, and then we'll go with 2 rotations all the way around for this to give it the sense that it's actually spinning. So we're going to go ahead and flatten this first keyframe to give it that curve, and then also flatten the other one and start to adjust it to something more representative like that, to where it's slow to start and then it starts to wind up into a faster motion. So we can preview that to see what it looks like. So where it's slow and then it's going to start spinning and then lead into our actual looping state. All right. So now if we go into our animator, we'll see this new state that was created for us. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this transition, that is how it was previously, and make a transition from here and then from here. All right, so now this is going to be very similar to your actual entryway. So remember, with the entryway or the door, there's 4 states, right? So you're going to have idle closed, opening, idle open, where the door is just staying open, and then you're going to have a 4th state, which is, closing, the actual door closing, going back to idle. So this is very, very similar to, you're going to set up the conditions in the exact same way that I'm going to do here, to where now we're going to have a condition between idle and wind up. So this transition selected, I'm going to go into this and make sure I have a condition set. So our toggle spin is going to be true. So from here, once we play the wind up, we just want to go right into spinning. There's no extra condition met. So this transition we want to have empty, so it just happens automatically. And then to go from spinning to idle, we want to make sure that this is still set to toggle spin is false. Right? We want to have this Boolean be false for it to basically turn off. So now we can test it and see what's actually happening. I'm just going to go to the scene view and then just hit this checkbox. So I start the wind up animation, and then we'll see it transition into the spinning. And the auto live link isn't working right now, but it looks like I'm I can just probably close the window and get it to open. And there you saw it went from that wind up into the actual spinning state. All right. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to think this may have been the old audio. Yeah. So I'm going to drag in my audio into my project, right? New audio clip. And now I want to get this to play during that wind-up state. And now I want to show you one different way and how to use an animation event. And this is really good stuff. It's really going to help you guys have more control over sound effects, over particles. This could be a light turning on and off. This could be a material changing color. You could have another animation play. You could send have a collectible spawn. Really, whatever you want to do with an animation event is up to you, whatever function you write. So what we need to do to have an animation event is we want to have a script on the object that has that animator, right? So we're going to need a script on our pivot object. Oh, there it is. I got to remove it. All right, so we're going to go new script. I'm just going to call it wind up. Let's go ahead and open it up. All right, so this script is going to be pretty straightforward. All we're going to need is access to the audio that we're going to set up. So the first things that we're going to need is a public game object. And we're going to call this wind up sound. Let's do wind up audio. So that's going to be our game object that holds our audio component. Right? And then we're going to need a private audio source and call this wind up source. Okay, so let's go ahead and just save that quick and go back to Unity and set that up. So we already have an audio source on our pivot. Remember that we have that wind sound effect that's on the pivot object. So we don't want to put another audio source on that same object. So what I'm going to do is just create an empty inside the pivot. Just call this wind up. So this is just an empty object to hold our audio source. All right, and now I'm going to drop in that new sound effect that we've got. I think that was in assets. It was in animation, so definitely stay organized. It's very easy to just forget about that step, but your team will thank you later. All right, so I'm going to turn off play on awake. All right, so now we have this audio source on this wind-up sound. So now if I go back to my pivot object, in that script I just wrote, where is it? Now you see I have this space to plug in an actual game object, right? So I want to plug in that game object I just created. So wind up goes into there. So now in the script, that's referencing this audio source is now going to reference that game object's component. So to do that in start, and this should all be review. I want to make sure my naming is proper. So we're going to do wind up source equals wind up audio dot get component audio source. All right, so now I have access to that. Now this wind up source equals that audio, all right, that audio source that's on that game object. So now to actually create an animation event, all we need to do is create a new function. So I'm going to call this void play wind up sound, or play wind up. So I'm just going to create a function. Now in this function, whatever you want to do, we can now turn this into an actual animation event. So you'll see that whatever functions you write on that script that has that same the same animation controller. So you'll see here on my pivot, this one has my animator, right? This one has that animation controller. all their scripts that have functions on that object, you're going to have access to them in the animation window. And I'll show you that in a second once I write the script. And the script is really straightforward. Does anyone know what we want to do here? If I just want to play the wind-up sound? No? So it would be the name dot play, right? So when this function gets called, whenever this function happens, this sound effect or this audio source is going to play. All right. So now with that script, and pretty straightforward, like all we're doing here in the start is setting this private audio source in our script equal to the the component that's on the game object inside of Unity. And then here we're just saying play. And we can go ahead and just put a print statement here just so we can see it in the console. And we're going to say, hooray, animation events. So I've used these in a few different really helpful ways to have lights turn on and off, or have materials change color, you know, mid animation, things like that. So now we have this wind up function. So now if I go back to my animation window, all right, and now I want to select the clip I want. So remember, we want the wind up clip. We can now hit this little key right here. So this is going to add an animation event into our timeline. And wherever you're wherever you're at in time is where it's going to actually add the animation event. So keep that in mind. You can preset it, or you can just move it wherever you want later. So now you have this little tick, and it doesn't do anything yet. So to actually do something, you just double click on it to actually set it to something, and this tiny little window is going to pop up. And it's going to say, what function do you want? So now if you see, if I hit this, we have that play wind-up sound. That was the function that I just created, right? So now, wherever this little tick is at, it's going to play, or it's going to run, it's going to do that function, right? So I can move this to a certain point. So maybe in your doorway, you want to have a sound effect at a certain point, or you want to have a sound effect in the beginning and then a delayed sound effect later on. This is a really good way to do it. So I'm going to keep mine towards the beginning, and let's see what actually happens. And I don't know if it'll play in the preview. No, I think you actually have to run the game. So now let's go ahead and test this. And I'll have my console open so you can see the print statement come up. That'll show you. That's not good. Check my animator. Okay, it's checked on. That was why. Well, that's a good idea. I'll have the animator side by side as well. Bam. Alrighty, so hanging out in idle state. Come up to my console. So that turn on sound effect, so not bad for a start, right? I kind of came up with that idea last night and found a clip that I felt matched pretty closely. So that sound effect definitely ties in pretty well with that motion. And that's a decent way of doing it, is finding an audio clip that you want and then trying to make an animation that length rather than, you know, have a 1 second animation and trying to find a sound effect that fits to that. And now this will run over and over again too when I turn it off. I'm able to play that sound effect over and over. A common thing I see students make a mistake with on the entryway is they're not sure how to play one sound effect for the open and one sound effect for the close. That's a requirement, to have 2 different sound effects. And most of the time what ends up happening is they'll have a trigger volume on one side that basically when the door opens, it'll play the open sound effect, but then you go to the other side and you stand the volume, it plays the close sound effect. But if you stand in one space, basically, and just start to open and close the door over and over again, it just keeps playing that open sound effect. So animation events are a really good way to have control over that, to say, during this animation, this will happen. And then I'm going to show you guys one other process, and then I can quickly show you an example of mine, a partially finished example where I'm using them in a few different ways. So any questions at all about animation events? No? You won? What you got, Noah?
So referring back to the script part, so you said that was also good for like turning different textures or lighting.
Sure.
So is that also included, let's say, a door has like a light that indicates it's a block open?
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, so instead of public game object wind audio, we would do whatever we named our light, right? And then private light, door light or entryway light. And then it would be the same thing, I can go ahead and write it. So public game object, let's just call this entryway light source, right? This is the actual game object, and then this would be the light itself, because the light is a component. If I go ahead and if I wanted to make a new light, the light itself that we get access to is a component, right? You'll see all a light is an empty game object with a light component. So it's the same thing. This would be the light that's our game object, and now the private would be the same thing. So we would do entryway light equals entryway light source dot get component light. And now you're starting to see, when you guys do this over and over again, you're like, wow, this is like the exact same thing, but I can do a whole bunch of different things. And that's what's awesome about it, right? Like once you understand it, we can change a light a different color, or we can change a material a different color. So void change light. This is where you would actually just get access to it. So you could do the light, and then it basically, whatever you want to do to it, you start to look in here. So this is the things you'll have access to. You would change the color. You could change the range or the intensity. The intensity is a really good one too. You can even animate an intensity to kind of give it this like blinking effect, right? It goes from low to high to high to low. So yeah, a lot of the same setup there. So now with that all set up, I'm just going to quickly complete this. And if you want to go ahead and do that and try it out, I definitely recommend it. I'm just going to call it complete wind turbine experiment 4. Not necessary. There's no documentation other than this video, and this is recorded. Oh no. Cannot find them. Am I in the wrong project again? No. No. It's there. I'll have to figure out why that's not letting me submit. I definitely see the files. Maybe I can revert that. No, that'll undo the changes. There we go. All right, so the last thing I want to show you guys, and this is going to be pretty helpful for just building things in the future, and hopefully the animation events maybe give you some ideas for your levels, and then maybe even this can push you even further and give you some more ideas for your levels in case you're having some problems with coming up with setups, or you just want to add something to your level. So what I'm going to do is go to import a package and a custom package. What I'm going to import is the forklift. So inside the Scraps Assets, Scraps Asset Depot, that is in Vehicles, you'll see this forklift package. If you want to go ahead and import this, you can. This is the one I'm going to be changing. So now I'm going to save my scene. All right, and let's remove the wind turbine. We can do this in the rigid bodies scene. This is tied to the rigid bodies, but not necessarily the same, but good place to do this. So now you'll see, once I import this, there we go. Did I hit cancel? Oh, it's over here. Import the package. That would help if I actually hit import. So now we'll have an art assets folder right here. Right, this is where all your art will come in from the scraps assets. You probably have already imported some. But now you see we have this FBX object, right? Here's this forklift here. Really nice asset, definitely well built. But if we wanted to animate this in some way, we don't really have the ability to right now, right? Because it's all one object, so we can't necessarily make the wheels spin, make this forklift go up and down. Maybe, we could have a setup in our level where you press E and the forklift starts moving and then the forklift raises to clear a path or do something, right? Maybe you need to find a missing tire and attach it. But how it's set up right now, we really don't have that option. What we can do is adjust some of that inside of Maya. I know, Andres, you'd asked a question about combining objects together. So what I'm going to showcase in Maya is the two functions are basically combine and separate. So that is really the best way to put objects together. And modeling for film and modeling for games, there's two big differences. One, obviously, with film, you cannot use triangles at all. Everything has to be a quad. When games, it's a little bit forgiving in that way. But also just in terms of what you're allowed to use and trying to get away with using as little geometry as possible. So what my instructors always told me was just shove it in. You don't need to extrude, like if you have like a pipe or something coming off, you don't need to extrude and make it all one seamless model. You can take parts of things and just shove them into each other to give that illusion and that silhouette and be efficient with your geometry. So a really nice thing between Maya and Unity is they play really well with each other, and you can just drag the FBX itself right into Maya. I think I lied. No, I can't. Yep, yeah, I can. Knew I could. There it is. All right, so now I have this in Maya. It's very similar to what it was in Unity, right, where it's just that one object. So if I want to open up the, oh, they took them away. So I want the hierarchy, or the layout, or what's the outliner? They call it the outliner. Two panes side by side. Okay, here we go. And this is, I want this one to be perspective. All right, so now you'll see in the outliner, this is very similar to the hierarchy in Unity, right? Same exact system. And here we'll see this is our mesh. We only have access to this one object called mesh. So what we can do is go to the face mode of this object. So if I right-click and go to face, right? So right-click and hold, you have the option of basically vert, edge, object, face, etc. Go to face, and now I can start to select the faces of my object that I want to separate. So this may not be true for every model that you get off the internet or off the asset store, but this one was built in a very logical way to where I can double-click on any face on the tire, and it's going to select the tire itself. Because notice how this little cylinder that's running through that's the axle isn't necessarily extruded and built from the tire. The tire is just a cylinder that's shoved into that axle, and the axle is just shoved into the body down here. So I'm going to go ahead and hold down Shift and double-click on all the tires. Right, so now I have all 4 tires selected, and also I'm going to go ahead and select the actual forklift part itself. Right, so this model was built in a very nice way that makes this easy. Not every model is going to be like this, but most of them, if it was made by a decent artist, will be pretty straightforward, at least that you can just select a few different objects. So now with those faces selected, I want to go up to this mesh window or drop-down menu, and you'll see combine and separate. Right, so pretty straightforward. What separate's going to do is separate each one of these sets of faces into its own object. Right, so go ahead and hit separate. And combine does the opposite, right? It's going to just combine them all into one object. So now you'll see I have this mesh with all these poly surfaces in here. All right, and notice that these icons next to these descriptions are indicative of something. This parallelogram with the arrow, that's basically an empty game object or an empty node. The ones that have a little quad, that's a mesh. The camera, obviously a camera. These ones are shaders down here. So these little icons actually mean something. So you can use those to your advantage and actually know what is this mesh here. It's actually just an empty node. So now I have all of my different objects. I'm just going to quickly name them. So and the importance to do this is all of this information that I'm naming in this hierarchy is going to be translated over to Unity very easily. All right, and then I'm going to call this forklift or fork, and then this will be body, the forklift body. All right, so now what we want to do is set up an actual hierarchy. So you can think about it as like an actual vehicle or as a little toy truck. When you move the body, you want the wheels to go with it, and then you want the forklift to go with it, but when you rotate the wheels, that should be independent. So what we want to do is we don't have the option to just drag and drop like you can inside of Unity. It's a little bit more than that. You have to actually use what's called group and ungroup. So Control G is going to group. Did they change that? No. Control G is going to group, and then I think ungroup is Control Shift G, but it's these two menu options right here. So what we want to do is child first and then the parent. So select all the children, and then whatever object you select last, that is going to be the parent, right? So I'm going to have all the tires in the fork itself, and then I'm going to hold down Control and then select the body, and that's going to be the parent. They did change these because it used to be P. Oh no, parent down here. Yeah, okay. All right, so P and Shift P for parent and unparent. Right, so I'm going to just hit the P key, and now you'll see I have this body, right? And now inside here I have all these independent pieces. And just like we did in Unity, we can move them and test them and make sure we see the motion that we want and it's behaving how we want it to. All right, so now what we want to do is get this object ready to bring into a game engine, right? Or get ready to bring into Unity. Because we don't want these empty nodes here. We want to clean up the object and make it as efficient as possible. So what we want to do is what's called, once you're done making a model, whether it's simple or complex, you still want to follow this procedure, is you'll see all these inputs down here. And if I make changes to the model in any way, if I move a face, if I add a face, anything, any action you do is all stored in this inputs. So we want to clear this out when we're ready to actually bring it into Unity so this information isn't a part of the file itself. So how to do that is very simple. All the time. Fail. Very simple. What we want to do, oh really? So we're going to edit, delete by type, history. And what that does is clears out all those inputs in there. And this thing is really just stuck on the screen now, isn't it? Yeah, it's just there. All right, so then another thing we want to do is we can get rid of that we can get rid of this empty mesh node because we don't actually want that in there. So to do that, we can hold down the body itself and then hold Shift P to unparent it and remove it from that mesh node, right? We just want this clean hierarchy of the body, the tires, and the forklift itself. All right, so now that's the case, and this object is ready to go. We want to go ahead and just export it into an FBX object. So I like to just select all of the pieces of it just to make sure, and I like to do a file export selection. Oh, is really? Wow. So you have to like, okay, so then it opens up this, and then you choose a Unity project to send. So then you go to here. Yeah, there's a few things, I'll check this out, because there's a few things you can actually set up when you export it, but for the most part, this is probably already done for you. The things I'll show is probably already default. So yeah, navigate to my project, put it right in where it goes. So I'm going to put in art assets, forklift, 3D objects, FBX, because this is hopefully an FBX file. So I'm going to call this forklift version 2. Right, select a project. So it wants me to select the root project folder. Should be this guy. Select. Okay, so then basically it's doing the same thing. It's literally going to just, now I'm in export selection. So now I'm going to put it in the location. So it really doesn't save any time at all. Art assets, forklift, 3D app, forklift version 2. All right, export. Alrighty, so now in Unity, you should see this other guy show up. So now drop it in. Exact same, right? Looks the exact same. But now if I look in the hierarchy, I have that same structure that I had previously, right? Or that I had in Maya, to where now I have these tires that are independent from each other, and I can rotate them or move them off, right? Say you want to have, right near the forklift, you have a small little stack of tires. Right, you can do that now by just, very quickly, and that took me just about 10 minutes, 15 minutes to move that into place, or to bring this asset into Maya and make that change. And now I have these other game objects that you can have in your level now. You put a rigid body on this, set this up to be interactive with the grav null. You could have like, the tire is missing. Go find the missing tire, and then you can attach it, and then the forklift moves and interacts. Right? We can now animate this forklift piece to move up and down, right? To animate just like this and have some actual functionality in the level rather than just a really cool set piece. All right. One other thing I'll show you quickly inside of Maya that I've gotten some questions about, and it's definitely good information, is how to change the pivot and movement of this object. So you have a specific object that you want to actually move the pivot of. So another good example is there's another vehicle on there where you have a vehicle that has a door on it, or a trunk, anything that you want to have it rotate and open up, right? So you want to actually move that pivot of that object to be in that correct location to actually animate it. Otherwise, it's going to be a nightmare to actually animate. So inside of Maya, what you can do is if you're on the move key, either move, rotate, or scale, but move is usually the safest. If you hold down D, you'll notice that you get that change. Your widget changes to, it looks like a square with a little, almost like a compass inside. See that? That change right there? So holding down D means I can actually move the pivot of the object. So if I can actually move this, now when I let go, the pivot's in the same location. So I can come down here, and now you can see it'll rotate from that location. Or I move the pivot over here, it'll hinge from this location. So to get it to snap to certain locations, hold down D, and now V will snap to verts. So hold down D and then also V, and see how it changes from a square to a circle? Now I can snap it to any vert on my object. So now it's very easily and convenient for me in the middle. right? Or I can put it on the hinge of a door or in a certain location. All right, so same thing in Unity, how it's, D and B, X will snap it to the grid, so D and X will basically snap to a grid, and even further, D and C snaps to a curve, so I can slide it like on an edge somewhere. Figured I'd show you guys that. V is vert, X is grid, C is curve. V is the best one to use, so understand that one. And if you're not familiar already, inside Unity, if you hold down V, you can snap objects to verts. So also really, really helpful to do. If you weren't already familiar with that, it's a good way to just snap level blocking meshes together or snap pieces into place. Any questions at all about this, what we've covered? Because we went over the map. There's a variety of stuff, but all of it was straightforward, but all very useful in its own way. We went over covering the map and setting up the map with the projector. Went over animation events and adding in that state, that third state, to our wind turbine, as well as breaking up a simple FBX object into a more complex game-ready object. Any questions at all about any of that stuff? Just going to add all my files. No? Well, if there's no questions, online students, you guys have any questions? Because if not, then I'm just going to let you guys work for the remainder of lecture. And then when we come back for lab, today is going to be the Project and Portfolio 3 students beta presentations. Jacob's excited. Almost done, buddy. Almost there. So feel free to participate in those if you want to just see where they're at. But I know you guys will probably be real busy with the wind turbine if you haven't done that, and the entryway, because that's going to be due. And remember, do you guys want me to go over how to make, I'm glad I just remembered this. Do you guys want how to make an executable? Remember the two things you have to change? Or the two things that you need to double check to make sure your entryway or your executable is built properly? Sure. What would you say? Build settings, that's one. The level manager. Adding the forklift. So real quick, I'll show you that. It's a good thing I should include in the video. So I'll do it with my wind turbine. Yeah, this is still in the recording. But everything I'm going to show you right now is from the first week. So it looks like my forklift actually got added to the hub. I'll fix that. All right. So remove the rigid body scene, save it, remove it. And now I'm going to add the wind turbine scene. So you'll add whatever scene it is you're working on. Probably should be your entryway. All right. I'm going to go to Perforce and just check out the build settings. So there's some more stuff I need to add. So project settings, build settings. All right, so build settings, right? We're going to remove the visuals. Don't need that one anymore. I'm going to go ahead and hit add open scenes. It'll add the wind turbine. That's good. And then we're also going to adjust the hub quick. And level manager, right? Let's double check this, make sure we have the correct scene. All right, now let's go ahead and make a build. And then definitely test it. When you upload it to Perforce, make sure you get the executable and the data folder. Oh no. Oh, I put it in the wrong spot. So I'm going to make sure I build it into a desktop and not the project. Should make a difference. So yeah, make sure you submit the data folder and the executable. I can't run the game without one or the other. Hooray, it's there. Does it work? All right. Looks good. All right, then you just add it to Perforce into the correct folder, right? Add it into right here, entryway number 5.